The roar of gunfire shattered the valley as explosions ripped through armored vehicles and sent plumes of black smoke into the sky, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning fuel and gunpowder, while the soldiers pinned behind jagged rocks and overturned vehicles scrambled frantically, shouting over the chaos as tracer rounds stitched the air like deadly fireworks and the desperate call of air support. "We need air support now," echoed through the comms, carrying panic and hope in equal measure, and somewhere far above the battlefield, Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan grinned under her helmet as she maneuvered her sleek attack helicopter with the precision of a seasoned acrobat, banking sharply to avoid a hail of enemy fire that clipped the rotor blades and sent a shiver through the frame. Her voice calm and almost teasing in the headset as she reassured the soldiers below that she had eyes on the target and everything was under control even as the situation teetered on the brink of disaster, calculating distances, wind speed, angles of approach, and firing solutions in her head in a dizzying rush of numbers and instincts honed through countless hours of flight and combat simulation, her fingers dancing over the controls as rockets launched with pinpoint accuracy, obliterating a convoy of enemy vehicles before they could reach the trapped soldiers' position, and as the explosions echoed off the valley walls, soldiers craned their necks to glimpse her in action, jaws dropping as the helicopter twisted and dove impossibly close to the tree line, narrowly avoiding the cliff edges. Yet every maneuver served a purpose, shielding the retreating squad, clearing a path through the minefield, and providing cover fire for the engineers struggling to disarm explosives while bullets pinged off nearby rocks, sending clouds of dust into the sun-drenched air. And all the while, Kara maintained a dry sense of humor, quipping over the comm, "Try to keep up, boys, I'm not slowing down," eliciting brief chuckles from exhausted soldiers even as they ducked behind cover, their respect for the rogue pilot growing with every hair-raising maneuver. The captain in the command post muttering through clenched teeth as he watched her actions on the live feed, part disbelief, part admiration, his calm voice cracking slightly over the radio as he reminded the units to hold their position. Knowing full well that Kara had already anticipated the worst scenarios and neutralized threats that hadn't even materialized yet, guiding the team with split-second decisions that left no room for error, every choice a gamble that could save lives or cost them in an instant, and as the last enemy vehicle was neutralized, Kara hovered expertly above the extraction point, landing with a flair that was part showmanship, part tactical necessity, stepping out with helmet in hand, soot smudged across her uniform, her eyes already scanning the horizon for the next threat, muscles tense but movements fluid, every inch the epitome of calm in chaos, while the soldiers she had saved broke into cheers and laughter, exhausted adrenaline mixing with relief, and even Corporal Diaz shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "Did she just take out that convoy before it even reached us?" While Jensen, still wide-eyed from the near-death experience, could only grunt, "Unbelievable, impossible," and the captain, torn between frustration at her audacity and gratitude for her skill, muttered softly to himself, "She's impossible," fully aware that Kara Morgan was more than a pilot, she was a force of nature, a singular combination of instinct, courage, and audacious brilliance, the kind of soldier who bent the rules without breaking them, who risked herself to save others, whose presence in the sky was already altering the course of the battle before anyone on the ground could even register it. And as the sun dipped behind the valley, casting long shadows over the smoke-streaked battlefield, Kara's thoughts were already ahead, calculating the next move, analyzing the terrain, predicting enemy reinforcements, and planning her next strike, because for her, the fight was never over until everyone on the ground was safe, the enemy neutralized, and her own limits tested, and even as she allowed herself a brief smirk, a trace of humor in the midst of devastation, she knew the real war. The one of instinct, split-second decisions, and consequences that carried weight far beyond the battlefield, was only beginning, and that above all else, she had become the answer to the soldiers' desperate cry for help, the one already in the sky, the one who could see everything, calculate everything, and intervene at the perfect moment, a guardian angel with rotors and rockets, daring, brilliant, and untouchable. A living legend in the making, yet still human, still aware that every action carried consequence, every miscalculation could cost lives, every maneuver was a test of skill and courage, and as the helicopter's shadow receded into the distance, leaving the soldiers to regroup and recover, Kara Morgan remained a figure of awe, humor, and deadly efficiency, the embodiment of instinct meeting opportunity, the proof that in war, sometimes the difference between survival and disaster was one fearless pilot already in the sky. The next morning, the base buzzed with activity, soldiers moving with precision but eyes constantly flicking toward the sky, still talking in hushed, awed tones about the previous day's chaos and how Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan had somehow descended into the valley like a force of nature, defying physics, probability, and protocol all at once, and Kara herself walked through the hangar with that casual swagger that drove the mechanics insane. helmet tucked under her arm, flight suit smudged with soot and streaks of dust, knowing full well that every supervisor within 100 miles was already whispering her name and debating whether to punish her for breaking every rule in the manual or to secretly send her off on the next impossible mission because no one else could pull off what she did. And as she passed the control room, Morrison appeared with his usual grimace, hands crossed and jaw tight. The kind of look that said he respected her but couldn't fully admit it to anyone. Muttering, "You're reckless, Morgan, and you nearly gave half my squad a heart attack," and Kara grinned, flashing a quick, irreverent salute. "Reckless is my middle name, Sergeant," and the words made Jensen snort, almost spitting his coffee in disbelief, while the other soldiers chuckled quietly because she had that effect, equal parts infuriating and inspiring, daring yet precise, and her humor was as sharp as her flying skills, slicing through tension like a scalpel, which was exactly how she wanted it, because fear and stress were tools to be manipulated, not allowed to control the situation, and the captain called in a briefing to discuss the day's upcoming operations, laying out a complex map of insurgent positions, weak points, and extraction routes while Kara leaned back in her chair, absorbing the intel with one eye on the map and the other subtly scanning the room, noting the fatigue on her teammates' faces, the skepticism in some eyes, and the quiet admiration in others. Calculating not just the mission parameters but the human variables that no plan could fully account for, all while Morrison muttered under his breath about her bending rules again and how he would personally make sure she learned the meaning of chain of command. And yet Kara had already mentally drafted 3 alternative strategies, each one daring, unconventional, and designed to maximize success while minimizing casualties, and when a junior officer timidly suggested sticking strictly to the protocol, Kara raised an eyebrow, voice dry and cutting. "Protocol is for groundlings. If you want to survive, you adapt," and a ripple of stifled laughter ran through the room, tension briefly breaking as the soldiers realized that here was someone who could not just survive chaos but turn it to her advantage, who saw patterns where others saw only danger, and who combined that vision with audacious execution. And the briefing continued, with Kara interjecting only when necessary, clarifying angles of attack, air cover timing, and support fire coordination, all delivered in her calm, measured tone that belied the fact that her mind was moving faster than anyone else's, calculating trajectories, fuel burn, wind shear, and enemy reaction time, and the captain occasionally shot her a wary glance, torn between admiration for her brilliance and frustration at her complete disregard for conventional procedure, muttering to Morrison, "She's a liability we can't afford to lose, but also, she might be the only thing keeping our people alive," and Kara, overhearing just enough, allowed herself a small smirk, because she knew exactly the kind of impression she was making, the mix of fear, respect, and begrudging reliance, the delicate balance of ego and need, and as the soldiers filed out to prepare for the sortie, Kara moved to the hangar, checking her helicopter with methodical care while tossing casual jokes at the crew, asking if they had tightened the bolts properly or if they expected her to crash before noon, eliciting eye rolls and chuckles in equal measure. Because her humor wasn't just entertainment, it was a weapon against tension, against fear, against the creeping sense of dread that came with high-stakes operations, and as she climbed into the cockpit, strapping in with deliberate precision, she ran through checklists with mechanical exactness, fingers flying over switches while simultaneously monitoring radar, weather patterns, and comm chatter, all of it synchronized with the kind of instinct that only came from hundreds of hours in combat. Situations where hesitation equaled death, and as she started the rotors, the familiar vibration thrumming through the frame of the helicopter like a heartbeat, she felt that familiar surge of adrenaline and focus, the same feeling she'd had the day before when the valley was engulfed in fire and smoke, and Morrison's voice came through the comm, sharp and begrudging, "Morgan, remember your limits," to which she replied without hesitation. "Limits are suggestions, Sergeant. And I don't take suggestions from anyone," a grin in her voice, and the ground crew shook their heads in exasperation, while Jensen whispered to a fellow soldier, "She's insane, but she's brilliant," and as the helicopter lifted into the sky, engines roaring and dust swirling around the hangar, Kara scanned the terrain ahead, already identifying choke points, ambush positions, and the paths most likely to keep her team safe, knowing that every maneuver, every decision, every calculation she made would ripple down to the soldiers on the ground, their lives hanging in the balance, and as she banked sharply to line up the approach to the hot zone, the sun glinting off the rotor blades and casting fractured shadows across the valley, she muttered to herself, voice barely audible over the engine roar, "Time to show them why the sky belongs to me," because for Kara Morgan, flying wasn't just a skill, it was a responsibility, a challenge, a game of life and death where instinct, humor, audacity, and precision all collided, and as the valley stretched out below her like a live battlefield chessboard, She knew that the day's mission would test not only her piloting but her ability to lead, to think ahead, and to make split-second decisions that could cost lives or save them, and all the while, she did it with the confidence, wit, and daring that made her simultaneously the squad's nightmare and its greatest hope, because Kara Hawk Morgan was already in the sky, already ahead of every threat, already bending the rules in a way that only she could survive, and as the helicopter's shadow streaked across the terrain below, soldiers looking up felt that strange mixture of relief, awe, and disbelief, knowing that the woman piloting above them was reckless, brilliant, and utterly unstoppable. The valley ahead was a living hell, smoke curling from shattered vehicles, bullets ricocheting off jagged rocks, and the cries of soldiers caught in crossfire piercing the air as Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan maneuvered her helicopter with surgical precision, banking sharply to avoid the hail of enemy rounds that whipped past the cockpit, her mind calculating trajectories, wind shifts, and enemy positions in real time. Every muscle in her body tense yet fluid as she guided her team into the hot zone, and from below, soldiers shouted into comms, some terrified, some amazed, all relying on her instincts to keep them alive, while Kara's voice cut through the chaos with a calm, almost playful authority. "Hang tight, I've got you. Eyes up, move fast, cover fire's coming," as she released a volley of precision rockets that obliterated the nearest enemy emplacements, smoke and debris swirling around the vehicles below, sending the trapped infantry into motion, scrambling to safer positions with the rhythm of her strikes dictating their every step, and in the midst of this ballet of chaos, Kara's humor never faltered, quipping over the comm. "Try not to shoot each other while I'm above, okay?" eliciting tense laughter from exhausted soldiers as she weaved between the canyon walls, narrowly avoiding hidden anti-aircraft fire that would have shredded an ordinary pilot to pieces, her eyes flicking to the Rayview camera and comm screens, monitoring squad movement, enemy reinforcements, and the ever-changing topography, calculating risk and reward in milliseconds, knowing that one split-second mistake could turn victory into a massacre. And as the first wave of enemy combatants attempted to flank the squad, Kara executed a perfect loop, rockets cutting a swath through their ranks while her helicopter's shadow raced across the valley floor, giving the ground troops a chance to regroup and strike back, and Private Diaz, crouched behind a rock with a rifle trembling in his hands, muttered to himself, "She's insane, but somehow she knows exactly what she's doing," while Jensen, eyes wide and sweat streaking dirt across his face, radioed back, "I can't believe this is happening, she's doing everything at once," and Kara, hearing him, let out a low chuckle that somehow cut through the tension, the sound almost surreal against the cacophony of gunfire, explosions, and shouting, yet it reminded the squad that even amid hell, they had a guardian above, someone who could bend physics, instinct, and probability to her will, as she guided them through ambush points, marking targets for snipers, timing her attacks to coincide with the squad's flanking maneuvers, and coordinating medevac teams to evacuate the wounded, each decision made with razor-sharp precision while still leaving room for improvisation because no plan survived the battlefield intact, and when a sudden volley of mortar fire rained down nearby, Kara banked hard, the helicopter groaning under the strain, and muttered over the comm, "Sorry, didn't get that in the syllabus, hang on," while pulling the aircraft out of a dive, narrowly avoiding a tree line and sending a cloud of dust into the valley, and as the squad scrambled to cover, a sense of awe and disbelief spread among the troops because they realized that every maneuver Kara executed, every target she neutralized, every pass she cleared was a life-or-death calculation that she performed flawlessly, balancing audacity with skill, instinct with analysis, and humor with deadly focus, and even Morrison, watching the feed from the command post, clenched his fists, torn between frustration at her disregard for protocol and admiration for the fact that she had kept everyone alive while decimating the enemy's position, muttering under his breath, "She shouldn't be able to do this, and yet she does," and as reinforcements from the enemy attempted to close in from the canyon's far side, Kara switched to a strafing run, bullets ripping through their cover, rockets clearing choke points, her helicopter moving like a phantom predator above the battlefield, while below, soldiers moved with renewed confidence, trusting her instincts as much as their own training, and when a trapped squad called for extraction, she dove down low, exposing herself briefly to enemy fire to mark their location, guiding them out with split-second timing, all while maintaining the rhythm of destruction that allowed no pause, no hesitation, and when the last enemy strongpoint was neutralized, Kara hovered above the valley floor, scanning for stragglers, monitoring the squad's positions, and adjusting coordinates for incoming supply drops, while she muttered to herself, "One day, they'll realize the sky isn't just empty space, it's a battlefield I own," and the soldiers, regrouping below, laughed and groaned at her audacity while the captain sighed in exasperation, shaking his head, "Unbelievable, she's reckless, brilliant, and untouchable. As Kara eased the helicopter into a hover over the extraction point, her heart pounding but controlled, muscles taut yet relaxed, every decision and maneuver perfectly timed, and as the last soldier climbed aboard, she executed a flawless vertical lift, evading enemy fire and retreating toward friendly lines. Her voice calm yet infused with dry humor over the comm, "Next round's on me, try not to die while I'm gone," leaving the squad stunned, exhilarated, and forever aware that their lives had been balanced on the razor's edge of one woman's instincts, courage, and unmatched skill, because Lieutenant Kara Morgan wasn't just a pilot, she was the difference between survival and disaster, the reason the pinned soldiers lived, and the living proof that in the chaos of war, audacity, intelligence, and fearlessness could turn impossible odds into victory. And as the helicopter banked toward the horizon, engines thrumming and rotor shadows stretching over the valley, Kara's mind was already on the next mission, the next threat, the next impossible challenge waiting beyond the edge of sight, knowing full well that every battle she fought shaped her, every decision had consequences, and every life she saved etched her name into legend. Even as the smoke from the battlefield rose like a signal, telling all who looked up that she was not just in the sky, she owned it. The sky had turned a bruised orange as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the jagged terrain below, and Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan gritted her teeth as a sudden shudder ran through her helicopter, a jarring hit that set alarms blaring and warning lights flickering, the fuel gauge dipping dangerously low while smoke curled from the port engine and the smell of burning hydraulics filled the cockpit, and yet she remained impossibly calm, fingers dancing over the controls with practiced precision, assessing damage, rerouting power, and calculating the probability of reaching the extraction zone without losing altitude or control, all while enemy fire streaked past her, tracer rounds catching the last light of day as bullets pinged against the rotor guard and the hum of the aircraft seemed to thrum in time with her pulse, and from below, the squad scrambled for cover, shouting into comms about the incoming assault, unaware that their guardian above was now herself. Vulnerable, yet refusing to relinquish control or let panic touch her voice, and Kara muttered under her breath, "Not today, not when you're counting on me," as she banked hard to avoid a sudden volley of RPGs, the rotor wash whipping dust and debris across the valley floor, while her co-pilot yelled, "We're taking serious damage," and she replied with calm authority, "I've got it, just keep eyes on the rear, we'll make it through." Her hands a blur as she stabilized the craft, running emergency diagnostics, rerouting hydraulics, and calculating fuel burn with military precision, while the squad below watched the helicopter wobble slightly, their anxiety rising as each heartbeat seemed to stretch into eternity, bullets whizzing past, enemy combatants trying to exploit any opening, and yet Kara threaded the needle, swooping low to provide cover fire for the retreating soldiers, rockets punching through enemy positions, suppressing fire long enough for the wounded to be evacuated, her voice calm over the comms even as the aircraft groaned under stress, and when a sudden gust of wind threatened to tip the helicopter into the canyon wall, she countered with a sharp, precise input on the cyclic, narrowly avoiding disaster, and Jensen's voice broke through the tension-filled air. "Lieutenant, you're crazy," to which she muttered dryly, "insane is a compliment," earning a stifled laugh from Diaz, who clung to his rifle behind cover, trying to make sense of the miraculous survival unfolding above, and as she guided the helicopter to a temporary hover, a loud bang shook the cockpit violently, and smoke began curling from the tail rotor, the warning system screaming, and she realized that a fragment of shrapnel had punctured the hydraulic lines, limiting her maneuverability, yet she refused to panic, knowing that any hesitation would cost lives, every instinct screaming, every calculation firing simultaneously, and she muttered, "All right, plan B," as she switched to manual controls, banking and pitching carefully, each move measured to compensate for the failing hydraulics while still suppressing enemy fire with strafing runs, the ground squad cheering and ducking with every rocket fired, their survival now hanging by a thread, yet in Kara's mind, she saw every outcome, weighed every risk, and chose the one that maximized survival despite mechanical failure, and the smoke in the cockpit thickened, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. Wiping it away with a gloved hand, focusing instead on the squad's coordinates, enemy positions, and the extraction point that seemed impossibly far with a failing helicopter, and when one of the soldiers below was struck, screaming for medevac, Kara executed a near-impossible hover above the open ground, lowering the winch with precision as the wounded man was pulled aboard, her hands steady despite the adrenaline, the creaking of the stressed airframe echoing in her ears, every second a balance between survival and catastrophe, and when another rocket slammed nearby, shaking the fuselage, she muttered, "Really, you couldn't pick a quieter day," with a faint smirk, the humor a lifeline against fear and exhaustion, and as she turned to guide the squad through the final enemy strongpoint before retreating to friendly territory, the tail rotor groaned ominously, the vibrations now threatening to throw her off course, yet she pressed on. Suppressing fire, marking targets, guiding ground troops, all while calculating trajectory, wind shear, altitude, and fuel consumption as if her life depended on it, because it did, and the squad followed her lead, covering each other, trusting instinctively that their fearless pilot above would see them through, and when a final volley of mortar fire rained down, Kara executed a daring maneuver, banking sharply to the side, countering the blast wave, smoke and fire streaking past the cockpit. And as the helicopter lurched violently, she felt the sting of metal shrapnel graze her arm, pain flashing but ignored, every nerve screaming, yet focus absolute, and with one final, precise strafing run, she cleared the remaining enemy positions, guiding the squad toward the extraction zone, shouting over the comm, "Almost there, hang on, keep moving." And as the last soldier boarded the waiting transport, Kara executed an emergency vertical lift, straining the weakened helicopter, engines screaming, rotor wash kicking dust and debris into the sky, narrowly avoiding a cliff edge, and as she banked away, the valley below was finally secure, soldiers cheering, adrenaline pumping, and even Morrison, watching from command, shook his head in awe, muttering, "Wounded and still unstoppable, impossible," while Kara, blood smudged on her arm, sweat and soot streaking her face, allowed herself a brief grin, muttering to herself, "Not broken. Not today," already calculating repairs, next mission, and every contingency, because for Lieutenant Kara Morgan, even when wounded, even when the aircraft faltered and the odds stacked impossibly against her, she remained the guardian in the sky, the balance between chaos and order, audacity and precision, humor and deadly skill, the one who refused to fail, refused to panic, refused to let the soldiers she had sworn to protect fall, the one who was already planning her next move, scanning the horizon, aware that every consequence of today's mission would ripple into tomorrow, yet confident that no matter the challenge, no matter the injury, no matter the failing machine beneath her, she would remain unbroken, untouchable, and already in the sky, where the real battle was fought. The morning haze hung low over the canyon, swirling with dust and smoke from previous skirmishes, as Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan adjusted her headset and scanned the terrain below, her helicopter hovering with near-perfect stability despite the tension radiating from the soldiers on the ground, and from the command post, Morrison's voice crackled through the comm, clipped and precise, reminding her of the delicate timing required for the combined ground and air maneuver they were about to execute. But Kara had already run through multiple contingency plans in her head, calculating the exact angles for strafing runs, cover fire, extraction routes, and suppressive fire, all while simultaneously noting enemy movement patterns, expected reinforcements, terrain obstacles, and the probability of misfires, the wind shear in the canyon complicating every calculation, her fingers dancing over the controls as if conducting an orchestra, and she muttered under her breath, "Crossfire, meet your worst nightmare," because this mission required not just skill but flawless coordination, split-second decisions, and the kind of intuition that separated rookies from seasoned operators, and as the first ground squad advanced toward the enemy encampment, Kara marked their positions with laser designators, communicating precise coordinates over the comm while adjusting her altitude and bank angle to maximize line of sight and minimize exposure to hostile fire, the ground troops relying on her guidance like mariners trusting a lighthouse in a storm, and the enemy was relentless, opening fire from concealed positions, snipers picking off any soldier who hesitated, while mortar teams attempted to saturate the approach routes, yet Kara's mind moved faster than the chaos below, every flick of the controls, every adjustment of throttle, every calculation of wind and gravity ensuring the helicopter remained a platform of absolute precision, and when a sudden squad of enemy combatants attempted to flank the ground troops from a ridge, she executed a daring strafing run, machine gun and rockets tearing through the cover while banking sharply to avoid return fire, and she quipped over the comm, "Try not to hide behind the wrong rock, boys," eliciting strained laughter through the tension, even as bullets pinged dangerously close and the rotor wash whipped dust and debris into the canyon, momentarily blinding the squad but also disorienting the enemy, the perfect combination of fear and relief, chaos and control, and she immediately adjusted coordinates for incoming artillery support, synchronizing airstrikes with ground movements with a precision that would make most senior officers' heads spin, all while monitoring fuel, hydraulics, engine temperature, and comm chatter, never losing focus, never letting the chaos overwhelm her, and when one of the squad members below was wounded, calling for immediate medevac. Kara banked sharply to provide a protective umbrella of fire, suppressing enemy snipers while coordinating the winch extraction, her hands moving with mechanical efficiency as she balanced the damaged aircraft, the incoming fire, and the timing of the lift, every decision carrying life or death consequences, and as the wounded soldier was hoisted safely, she guided the squad through the canyon with staggered cover fire, leading them into a bottleneck where enemy reinforcements attempted to trap them. Yet she anticipated every move, calculating trajectory and exposure, releasing rockets and gunfire with split-second timing, and as the last enemy unit fell back, Kara hovered briefly to reassess, sweat streaking her soot-covered face, muscles tense but controlled, heart hammering as the adrenaline surged yet never overwhelming clarity, and the squad below, breathing heavily, looked up in awe, muttering words of disbelief and admiration, realizing that every movement, every strategy, every risky maneuver above was calculated not just to survive, but to ensure maximum success with minimum casualties, and even Morrison, watching on the monitors at command, had to bite back a groan of astonishment, muttering, "She's reckless, she's defying protocol, and she's saving lives we thought were lost," while Kara adjusted altitude, checking fuel and weapon systems, mapping enemy reinforcements, and predicting escape routes for the squad, already planning their extraction and next cover fire, while also monitoring comms for any unexpected developments, all in perfect harmony, a dance of chaos tamed by skill and instinct, and as the squad reached a safer ridge, Kara executed a precise hover to provide cover fire while marking enemy positions for artillery strikes, rockets exploding on cue, debris scattering in the canyon, and enemy combatants caught in crossfire. Collapsed in confusion, their carefully orchestrated ambush now reduced to chaos and retreat, and Kara, balancing the failing hydraulics from a previous engagement, adjusted thrust and cyclic inputs, her voice calm but commanding, reminding soldiers to move quickly, and as she banked for another pass to ensure no enemy remained in the flanks, she allowed herself a brief smirk, muttering, "Crossfire doesn't scare me. I thrive on it," because she knew that the very name of the operation meant danger, but danger was her element, her canvas, and every calculated risk paid off, as ground troops moved with renewed confidence, synchronized with her air support, feeling the invisible but palpable presence of a guardian angel above, guiding, protecting, punishing, and saving, and as the final enemy combatants retreated, Kara executed a final sweep, surveying the battlefield with expert eyes, noting positions, casualties, and any overlooked threats, her mind already calculating repairs, extraction paths, and contingencies for the next phase, while below, the soldiers cheered, fatigue and relief mixed with awe and disbelief, knowing that they had survived because of one pilot, whose combination of humor, audacity, intelligence, and instinct had transformed a deadly crossfire into a precise victory, and as Kara banked away, rotor wash kicking up dust and smoke into the early morning light, she spoke over the comm with her trademark dry humor, "Try not to get yourselves killed while I'm gone," leaving the squad laughing, shaken, and inspired, and even as the extraction point came into sight, she remained vigilant, eyes scanning for stragglers or hidden threats, aware that the mission was never truly over until every soldier was safe, every consequence accounted for, and every risk mitigated, because for Lieutenant Kara Morgan, crossfire wasn't chaos to endure, it was a challenge to master. And above all, she had already proven that in the sky, in the heat of the battle, she was untouchable, unstoppable, and utterly indispensable. The clouds churned above the rugged canyon like an angry sea, and Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan gritted her teeth as the radar blip in her display solidified into a clear target, a rogue enemy fighter slicing through the sky with deadly precision, their engine roar competing with the thrumming of her own helicopter, and in an instant, the calm focus she had maintained for countless missions crystallized into razor-sharp intensity, her fingers dancing over controls as she adjusted altitude, bank, and thrust, calculating the wind shear, gravity pull, and velocity of her adversary, knowing that one miscalculation could turn this duel into a fatal encounter, and as the enemy craft dove toward her squad below, firing rounds that traced deadly arcs through the air, Kara executed a sudden barrel roll, twisting the helicopter in a way that seemed impossible, the rotor blades slicing through turbulence as she countered every shot with precision evasive maneuvers, and her voice cut through the comms with calm authority, "Heads down." His coming in hot, eliciting shouts of awe and fear from the soldiers below as they ducked for cover, bullets and debris kicking up around them, while Kara simultaneously plotted a counterattack, lining up angles for her rockets and machine gun, predicting the enemy's evasive maneuvers, and anticipating the split-second choices of a pilot who was as skilled as she was ruthless, and when the first volley of rockets streaked through the sky, she banked sharply, letting them miss while positioning herself for a perfect follow-up, the smoke trails and explosions illuminating her deft control of the aircraft, every movement a symphony of skill and instinct, and as the enemy fighter twisted and looped, attempting to flank her, she countered with precision strafing runs, machine gun traces ripping through the air, narrowly missing terrain while forcing the adversary to break formation, and from below. The squad's voices were a mixture of terror and awe, muttering words like, "Unbelievable, she's insane, but brilliant," because Kara's control of the battlefield extended not just across the land, but into the sky, where speed, gravity, and reaction time were life or death measures, and even the captain at command, watching live feed with bated breath, muttered under his breath, "If anyone can survive this, it's her," as Kara executed a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding incoming rounds that would have shredded a less skilled pilot, and she laughed softly, almost to herself. A brief moment of levity in the storm of combat. "Come on, you've got to do better than that," as her missiles locked on, tracking the enemy fighter with deadly accuracy, and the ensuing explosions and evasive maneuvers sent debris and smoke spiraling, lighting the clouds in streaks of orange and gray, while below, soldiers moved with renewed vigor, inspired by her audacity, knowing that their survival depended on her brilliance and willingness to engage the threat head-on, and as the duel intensified, Kara executed a daring split-S maneuver, losing altitude quickly while forcing the enemy to follow her descent, banking hard at the last second to line up a perfect rocket strike, the missile finding its mark, sending the adversary spiraling out of control, yet Kara didn't allow herself a moment of celebration, already scanning the horizon for other threats, calculating fuel, ammo, squad positions, and terrain hazards, knowing that one mistake now could erase all the lives she had worked so hard to protect, and when the enemy fighter attempted a desperate counterattack, coming in low and fast, she executed a near-impossible dive, dodging incoming fire, and simultaneously released her counterstrike, the rocket finding its target with unerring precision, and as smoke and fire erupted from the enemy craft, Kara banked away, letting the fleeing pilot disappear into the horizon. And even as the immediate danger passed, her mind raced, already analyzing what just happened. Assessing damage, checking instruments, and confirming squad status, the helicopter vibrating with the adrenaline-fueled tension that only such close calls could generate, and from below, soldiers shouted their awe, cheering, laughing, and shaking their heads, muttering that she was untouchable, unstoppable, and utterly fearless, while Kara allowed herself a brief smirk, muttering under her breath, "You can't hit what you can't predict." And in that instant, she felt the weight of every decision she had made, every maneuver calculated, every risk assessed, yet never allowed doubt or hesitation, because hesitation in the sky could be fatal, and she had already proven time and again that instinct, skill, audacity, and humor could combine into survival, and more than that, dominance. And as she hovered above the valley, engines screaming, rotor wash whipping dust and debris into the sky, her eyes scanned every ridge, every rock, every possible ambush point, calculating the next move even as the adrenaline slowly ebbed, leaving only focus and determination, and the squad below, breathing heavily from the near disaster, shouted into the comms with relief and disbelief, praising her for saving lives and neutralizing a threat that could have decimated their position, while Kara's fingers danced over controls, running diagnostics, and her mind already running simulations for what might come next, because in her world, the sky was never safe, never static, never predictable, and she had learned to anticipate every possible outcome, manipulate chaos, and turn danger into opportunity. And as the sun began to dip behind distant ridges, casting long shadows over the battlefield, Kara Morgan, helmet glinting in the last rays of light, allowed herself a faint grin, voice calm, laced with her trademark dry humor. "Next time, try bringing something faster," leaving the soldiers below laughing, shaking their heads, and inspired, while the captain muttered in disbelief, "She's not just in the sky, she owns it," because Kara had once again proven that even against the most skilled adversary, with the right combination of skill, instinct, humor, and audacity, one pilot could turn the tide of battle, and as the rotor blades hummed their relentless rhythm, she was already thinking about the next threat, the next mission, the next impossible challenge waiting beyond the horizon, aware that while today's duel was over, tomorrow's sky would demand everything she had, and she would deliver, as always, untouchable, unstoppable, and already in the sky, where the rules were hers to bend, the enemy hers to outsmart, and survival hers to guarantee. The valley lay eerily quiet, the aftermath of relentless gunfire, rockets, and chaos still smoldering in twisted metal and scorched earth, and Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan hovered low over the battlefield, scanning for movement, every muscle coiled, eyes sharp, knowing that even when the enemy appeared defeated, danger lingered in the shadows, waiting for the slightest lapse in focus, while below, her squad moved cautiously through the wreckage, checking on the wounded, securing cover, and whispering words of disbelief and gratitude under their breaths, because they all knew that without her audacity, skill, and instinct, many of them would not have survived the last 48 hours, and Kara felt the weight of that knowledge like a physical force, her hands gripping the controls with precision even as her mind raced through every possible contingency, calculating the risks of overextending, the probability of hidden enemies, and the timing for extraction, knowing full well that one mistake could turn the valiant into the fallen in a heartbeat, and as a sudden flare of movement caught her eye, she banked sharply, rockets ready, instinct screaming, and realized that a lone enemy sniper had positioned herself on a ridge, taking aim at her squad below, and in that instant, Kara faced the brutal reality of being both hero and target, the duality that every soldier knows but few fully experience, because to save lives, she had to expose herself to extreme risk, and every decision carried a moral weight, a responsibility for the lives dangling precariously below her, and she muttered under her breath, "Time to make a choice, fast," before executing a daring dive, twisting the helicopter into a near-impossible angle to provide suppressive fire, while simultaneously guiding ground troops to safer positions, and as rockets tore through enemy cover, the sniper fired, missing narrowly, the bullets ricocheting and cutting through debris, sending clouds of dust into the canyon, yet Kara remained unflinching, voice calm and commanding over the comms, instructing the soldiers, marking targets, and coordinating cover fire, every move measured, precise, and perfectly timed, because hesitation could cost lives, and even as adrenaline surged, she felt the raw exhaustion, the gnawing fatigue that no training could fully erase, but she refused to let it dominate, focusing instead on calculation, instinct, and survival, and when the sniper attempted a flanking maneuver, Kara anticipated the path, banked sharply, and released a rocket with unerring accuracy, the explosion signaling the end of that threat, while below, the squad breathed out in relief, muttering words of awe and disbelief, realizing that every hair-raising maneuver, every calculated risk, every split-second decision had saved them again, and yet Kara's thoughts were already moving forward, aware that war never paused, that threats lurked everywhere, and that survival was never guaranteed, and as the smoke cleared, she noticed one of her own squad limping toward cover, hit by shrapnel, bleeding, and she felt the pang of responsibility tighten in her chest, knowing that despite all her skill, lives could still be scarred, injured, or lost, and she shouted over the comm, directing a medic to the injured soldier, calculating the timing of enemy fire, the approach vector, and the safest path, her voice calm but sharp, "Move fast, cover me, I've got you," and as the medic reached the wounded, Kara executed a hovering maneuver to shield them from potential sniper fire, rotor wash whipping dust and debris into a blinding cloud, her mind racing with contingency after contingency, while below, the squad whispered, "She's insane, but she's saving us," and in that instant, Kara understood the delicate balance she carried, the razor-thin line between heroism and casualty, between audacity and recklessness, because every move was both salvation and gamble, every calculation could preserve life or snatch it away, and she embraced it, eyes scanning the horizon, heart steady despite the chaos, every sense alive, every instinct firing, as she guided the squad to an extraction point under heavy enemy fire, marking positions, coordinating medevac, calling in cover fire, and calculating fuel, ammunition, and timing, all while keeping the helicopter steady despite minor damage from previous engagements, and when a sudden ambush erupted from the canyon edge, Kara dove, strafed, and released a rocket with deadly precision, saving the squad yet again, while her hands moved with mechanical skill, executing impossible maneuvers, balancing risk and reward, humor and deadly efficiency, and from below, soldiers whispered, laughed nervously, and shook their heads, awed by the woman who could simultaneously command, protect, and execute in the most extreme circumstances. And as the extraction point neared, Kara scanned the ridge line for any last threats, her eyes narrowing on subtle movements, calculations running faster than thought, while below, soldiers loaded into waiting transports, shouting words of gratitude and disbelief over the comms, adrenaline mixing with relief, and even Morrison, watching remotely, muttered in exasperation and awe, "She shouldn't survive this, and yet she does, again," and Kara, feeling the fatigue gnawing at her muscles and mind, allowed herself a brief smirk, muttering dryly, "Never tell me I'm reckless," as she executed a final sweeping pass, clearing the area, suppressing enemy fire, and ensuring the squad's safe boarding, the rotor wash kicking up smoke and dust into the setting sun, and as the last soldier climbed aboard, she banked sharply, retreating toward friendly lines, eyes scanning the horizon, already anticipating the next challenge, already running calculations, already aware that the line between hero and casualty was thin, constantly shifting, and that every choice she made carried consequences that could ripple far beyond the battlefield, and yet despite it all, Kara Morgan remained unbroken, resolute, untouchable, and utterly fearless, already planning the next move, already in the sky, already the guardian, the orchestrator of survival, and as the helicopter rose above the canyon, the valley stretching behind her like a battlefield etched in fire and smoke. She allowed herself a fleeting thought, almost whisper, "We survived, but the war isn't over," the words hanging in the air like a warning, a promise, a hint of unresolved tension, because while today's battle had been won, tomorrow would demand everything again, and she would be ready, above it all, untouchable, unstoppable, and already in the sky. The night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the canyon, the battlefield below now quiet except for the occasional flicker of smoke and distant echoes of shifting debris, and Lieutenant Kara Hawk Morgan hovered above in her helicopter, the engines hummed the only sound breaking the darkness, her eyes scanning the terrain with relentless precision, every shadow a potential threat, every flicker of movement a puzzle to solve. And as the extraction team below regrouped, checking the wounded and gathering supplies, Kara felt the exhaustion in her muscles, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, but her mind remained hyper-alert, calculating wind patterns, remaining fuel, enemy movements, and possible ambush points, while the comms were filled with whispered relief, muted laughter, and murmurs of awe at the feats she had accomplished in the past day, the squad's voices tinged with disbelief and gratitude, yet she knew better than to let her guard down, because in her world, calm was temporary. Peace was fragile, and danger was always lurking just beyond sight, and as she guided the helicopter toward the rendezvous point, a subtle blip on the radar caught her eye, almost imperceptible, a faint anomaly moving against the night's natural currents, and her instincts flared instantly, muscles coiling, heart quickening, calculations running faster than thought, because she had learned the hard way that anomalies in the sky often meant trouble. Yet she maintained her composure, fingers steady on the controls, eyes flicking between instruments and the dark terrain below, already analyzing trajectories, probable enemy intent, and evasive maneuvers, all while coordinating with the squad beneath her, whose exhaustion and relief were palpable, voices over the comm tinged with nervous humor, as one soldier whispered, "I swear she's part machine," eliciting chuckles despite the tension, and Kara allowed herself a brief smirk, muttering softly, "If only they knew," as the radar blip shifted slightly, revealing movement too controlled to be random wildlife, too deliberate to be wind interference, and her mind raced, running simulations, contingency plans, and escape vectors, aware that every decision now could either secure their safe return or plunge them back into chaos, and as she adjusted altitude and banked to investigate, the moonlight glinting faintly off the metallic surface of the anomaly confirmed her suspicion. Another enemy operative, advanced, stealthy, moving with intent toward her squad's extraction point, and Kara's hands tightened on the controls, voice steady but low over the comm, eyes sharp, "Team, we've got company," and immediately her mind split into multiple calculations, approach angles, timing of fire, evasive maneuvers, squad coordination, and fuel conservation, all while maintaining the appearance of calm that had become her signature, and as the enemy moved closer, she executed a sharp roll, taking advantage of moon shadows to obscure the helicopter, simultaneously releasing a controlled burst from the side-mounted gun, the tracer rounds illuminating the darkness for a fleeting second, marking enemy positions while keeping her own location concealed, and from below, the squad scrambled for cover, whispers of awe and fear mixing with careful coordination, trusting Kara above, knowing she had saved them countless times, yet understanding that tonight might be different, that every hero has limits, that every skill has a boundary, and Kara's mind processed it all, calculating risk versus reward, instinct versus protocol, audacity versus survival, and she executed a daring maneuver, weaving the helicopter through narrow canyon walls with precision that defied physics, drawing the enemy's attention, manipulating their movements, forcing them to reveal themselves while keeping her squad out of harm's way, and as she dodged incoming fire, she couldn't suppress a faint chuckle, muttering dryly, "You picked the wrong hawk to challenge," her humor a tether against fear and tension. And the enemy pilot's reactions confirmed her analysis, overconfident, predictable, leaving openings she exploited instantly, releasing rockets and precise gunfire in a rhythm that both suppressed the enemy and protected her squad, all while she adjusted thrust and angle, monitoring hydraulic stress, fuel, and ammunition. And when the enemy attempted a flanking maneuver from above, Kara anticipated it, banking sharply, twisting the helicopter in a near-impossible arc, forcing the rogue operative into a retreat path that exposed them to her squad's remaining fire. And as the final exchange erupted, tracer fire crisscrossing the dark sky like jagged lightning, rockets striking with deadly accuracy, debris spiraling in the moonlight, Kara maintained her calm, calculating, observing, guiding, and surviving, while below, the squad moved in perfect unison, a testament to trust, skill, and her leadership, and as the last enemy operative disappeared into the darkness, Kara finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, scanning the horizon, noting subtle movements, and already thinking of potential contingencies, because in her world, victory was only temporary, and safety was always relative, and as the squad boarded the extraction vehicles, voices weary but filled with gratitude, Kara hovered above, eyes flicking to the dark ridges, aware that while tonight's battle was won, tomorrow would bring unknown threats, unseen challenges, and consequences that she had yet to anticipate. And in that moment, a faint glimmer on the radar caught her attention, almost too subtle to trust, a shadow moving against the wind, suggesting that while the immediate danger had passed, something, or someone, was already planning their next move, and Kara's mind sharpened instantly, instincts firing, calculations running, muscles tensing, yet her voice remained calm, over the comm, to the squad below, "Stay ready, we're not done yet," a statement both warning and reassurance. Because she knew the battlefield never truly ended, the war never truly paused, and even as she guided her squad towards safety, she felt the weight of responsibility, the thrill of victory, and the cold whisper of unresolved danger on the horizon, leaving the night open, uncertain, and suspenseful. And as the helicopter banked toward the final extraction point, rotor wash stirring dust and smoke into the moonlit sky, Kara Morgan, unbroken, untouchable, and ever vigilant, muttered softly, "The shadows are already moving, and I'll be ready," the words hanging in the night like a promise, a warning, and a hint of adventures yet to come, because in the sky she owned, the battle was never over, and the horizon always held secrets.